This show, like all shows on Blogging Heads TV and Mini of Life TV, is produced by the Non-Zero Foundation. Please consider supporting us financially at patreon.com/nonzerofoundation. Thanks.
Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Bill, I'm liking this. I'm liking the new look, man.
For those who can't see, who are listening in the podcast format, my beard has been shaved. It's not intended to be a permanent change, but
I think you should stick with this for a while. Now, I have to admit, there was an in-between stage where I'll call it your David Crosby stage, which I didn't like. But I think this is rugged.
Well, basically,
and, I like this.
I'm a little quarantine stir crazy, so I got some mustache wax, and I actually, in the night when everyone else was, not around to tell me to stop, I did a handlebar, and I looked at it and said, "This is not going to fly." And so
there comes a time in every man's life when this is not going to fly hits them. We all have that point. It's if you watch the TV show How I Met Your Mother, it was the red cowboy boots was the "this is not going to fly" moment for that guy.
Now I can pull off the cowboy boots. You've seen that,
yeah, but not red, not red cowboy.
Not red.
Boots.
I got this. I got the snakeskins. So I got rid of the mustache wax, and then everyone saw me with sort of the walrus mustache. And
that's the one I'm thinking of. And by the way, here's a quick plug. If you want to see what that looked like, there's one place that you can go, and that is to my YouTube page, where Bill and I interviewed David Frum on Friday. We had a great conversation, and Bill that's where you can see the mustache. Go check it out. There's
two places. If you friend me on Facebook, I have a post with all 4 of my attempted mustaches. And then after I did a half-baked attempt at a John Waters, pencil-thin mustache, I just shaved it off, and we'll just grow it back from here.
I'm not sure John Waters is my fashion icon, but I do like that Jimmy Buffett song, I Wish I Had a Pencil-Thin Mustache. So there's a special place in my heart for that. But the Boston Blackie kind, I don't even know what that means, but that's what he says.
Well, this has been important DMZ fare.
Well, we got to plug the DM Zoom.
That's true. It's true.
Which is we're going to do it again Friday.
I'm going to ask you one other non-political familial topic. So in our school district, this is the last week of school. And the kids have enough Zoom interaction with teachers that we can't hide that fact from them. They know this is the last week of school. My 5th grader is having 5th grade graduation this week. So we have to figure out what to do for the summer. Pretty much all their camps are canceled. Do you have a game plan? Like, what do you have a summer schedule planned?
Yeah. So, as you know, I've decamped to West Virginia.
I just looked up your town on the map, and like yours barely West Virginia, right? You're like kind of cheating.
Oh yeah, no, I could be in DC in an hour. People commute. People live here full time and commute to DC. My wife's father, who was a park policeman, very timely, of course, commuted every day from West Virginia to Washington DC as a cop on his motorcycle. So it can be done, but this is a long way of saying that our camps are open, Bill. We have camps here.
Oh, they're
open.
They've not shut down.
And my church, the church I go to out here, we did church service. The first time I've been to church in 3 months or more, and they have a huge tent. And like a cool, like nice tent. This isn't like one of the old time revival camp meetings. This is like a modern, huge, awesome, open air, like tents, more of just a covering. You think of it as just more of a roof. The sides are wide open. And so we were able to go to church. We've been visiting state parks, places where you can kind of hike and stuff. But I have to be honest with you, man. It's getting a little dicey. Just being like, we went from, going to work every day. The kids are going to school every day. And even just something as simple as like, if you have a day off, maybe like have a babysitter or grandma take the kids swimming to the swimming pool and burn off all their energy. And then we come back as a family and have dinner together and we're all happy and getting along. Well, the swimming pool's closed, right? There's no swimming pool, unless you have your own. And so it's tough, man. I think we are, blessed to be where we are, but it's challenging.
I just can't figure out how to make up the schedule. Because I say to them, I'm like, look, think of some kind of project, something that's going to entertain you for a long period of time. You're in this house now for another good 3 months at least. Like, read the Harry Potter series.
The only thing that they want to do, my kids, would be video games.
Well, yeah. If I let them just do whatever, that's what they would do.
That's not good.
But I'm trying to. Well, we're saying, look, you only have X amount of screen time, a day. We can't be with you all day long. We have to still work. Think of something.
I feel like my kids want my attention all the time.
Yeah.
It's not enough. Even if I let them play video games, they want to show me how it works and all this stuff. And to be honest with you, I could get sucked into these games. Some of them are really good. I could probably get sucked into them, and I would have, basically be unemployed. But it's, I don't know what the answer is. And,
well, it just depends on, I think some children, they really want to learn an instrument, or they really want to write. They really like reading.
Does that exist?
I think so.
Are those real?
I hear stories. I hear stories that there are children that have discrete interest, but and I assume they'll get there at some point, but they haven't organically come up with like, this is the thing.
I'm also, the other thing that happens to me too is I'm well aware of the cats in the cradle syndrome. I feel so blessed that my kids want to hang out with me and want to show me things, and like there's probably going to come a day not too far down the road where they've got their own thing going on. And they've got their own friends and their own, whatever. And then I'm going to be like, what about me? So I don't want to, it's tough, man. Being a dad ain't easy.
Anyway, we should get back to business. So if you ask me, Matt Lewis, if you look at all the available data, if you look at polling data, you look at presidential national data, you look at swing state data, you look at Senate data, you look at past elections, you would say, while you can't predict the future, you can't know how things are going to change, as of today, a blue wave is building. That seems to me, the only way to deny that fact is just to say, I don't believe the data. Don't look at the data. The data is terrible. Polls were wrong before. You don't know what's really going to happen. Like that. There's no actual analytical argument you can make. All the data points in one direction.
I think that's right. I wrote about that a couple of weeks ago at the Daily Beast. Mm-hmm. It looks like, but honestly, I feel like since then, I'm not as confident in that. Now, again, the data has nothing to do with my lack of confidence. But when I wrote that a couple of weeks ago, I was more confident. I do feel like there is that, unfortunately, whether it's the defund the police thing, we could talk about. I know you think it's overblown, but it's part and parcel of a larger problem. Some of the cancel culture stuff. I do think that there's something of a backlash against that. I think that, that the left, is now sort of in their own authoritarian mode.
Well, I
think it's a turn. Let me just finish. I think it's a turnoff to the Trump. I'm sorry, to the Trump Biden voters, and I also think the vice presidential pick is getting less and less clear now, and that is an opportunity for Biden to blow this.
I want to talk about both those things, defund the police and VP.
Yeah.
But I just want to really emphasize what the data is saying right now. So you have Biden, as of this morning, at +8 in the Real Clear Politics average. Hillary Clinton never hit +8 after April in 2016. She did get to 7.9 in early August, and I think she hit 7 in early October. But she was just more up and down.
Trump would do something crazy or say something crazy. She would go up, and then that would die down, and it would get close again.
And then email stuff kept popping up too. Her things kept popping up, and his things kept popping up. So she was up far more than he was. So it was easy at the time to say, "Oh yeah, there are these dips," but in general, she's ahead. When in fact, those dips proved to be very relevant. That there was this sort of kind of weight pulling her down, a hesitancy, and at the same time, a kind of growing comfort level with Trump amongst those on the right side of the fence. So sometimes her margin would be better, but she was kind of low. She wasn't hanging around 50 much of the time once you got into the summer and fall. And then Trump would kind of inch up. Certainly once you get into October, he has a big, surge, towards the end. And you also had certain states like Michigan and Wisconsin that were not heavily polled, that were just way off the mark. Other states, they weren't way off the mark. Florida wasn't way off the mark. Arizona wasn't way off the mark. But Michigan and Wisconsin were. So now Biden has never been below 4 in the Real Clear Politics average, whereas Hillary was below 4 at several points. Obama in 2012 never was at +8 the entire time. I think Biden he's certainly in a much better place today than either Hillary or Obama were in their races. You go back to 1932. There's a Gallup page with all of the trial heat polling they've done for every election. If Trump won, it would be the biggest comeback for any incumbent since Truman. Mm-hmm. Truman was down 11 in June and July. This is when polling was much cruder. It was not done nearly as frequently. And so there was polling in October. There were only 3 pollsters at the time. And Gallup was I think Trump was down 5 in October. There was one poll, I think it was the Roper poll, where Trump was actually down only 2. But the 3 main pollsters all came together and they said, "Look, this is baked. We don't have to keep polling. We can stop in mid-October because this is so clearly done."
Seems like a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean they learned that hard lesson. So the two incumbents that lost re-election since polling, there's only been 3 since Grover Cleveland. There's only Hoover and Carter and Bush 1. There wasn't really polling for Hoover. Carter.
I mean, do you count Ford?
Elected incumbents. Okay. Ford had a massive comeback. Ford, he was at 29% in July. He had a furious comeback over the summer and fall and almost overtook Carter. But that's a situation where you have an incumbent who was not all that well known in the first place because he wasn't elected. And the challenger wasn't all that well known. He was an outsider phenomena. And so as things cropped up over the course of things, that race narrowed. Now you have Trump, an incumbent, Biden, a very well-defined figure, has been in politics for literally since 1972 in national politics. So I think that volatility you wouldn't expect, and we haven't seen it to date. Carter in 1980 was leading in the summer, but with being only in the high 30s, I think low 40s sometimes, with Anderson polling very high as a third-party candidate, Carter's level was analogous to his very low approval rating. And so as Anderson faded, Reagan shot up. And Bush, similarly, was knotted up with Perot in the summer of 1992. He was also in kind of the upper 30s and never really went much beyond that in what remained a three-way race. So Trump's now in the low 40s, akin to his job approval. After being in office for 3.5 years, it would have to be such an immense change of events that would be truly unprecedented in modern polling times for him to come back. Which is not to say that, maybe the pandemic gets better, maybe the economy gets better, and that happens. But it would require something that dramatic.
Yeah. And even if the economy gets better, one of the things people need to realize is, so he's at 16.3% actually unemployment rate.
Yeah, right, right.
So Obama and Reagan both won 7-point-something% unemployment, but the trajectory was really heading in the right direction for them. They had dramatically come down.
I mean, Reagan's was very fast. Obama's was more kind of slow and steady.
But he went from 10. Obama had a 10% unemployment rate in 2009.
Yeah.
And he gets it down to 7-point-something.
And Obama clearly inherited a bad economy. No one blamed him for the crash. Reagan had the big recession, 82, that was on his shoulders, but there was the sharp recovery.
Yeah. Ford, George H.W. Bush, and Carter both all three lose with the 7-point-something% unemployment rate. So Trump's at 16.3. Last time I checked, he said it was 13, but there was an error.
Well, it's more of a technical clarification.
Yeah, I don't think people don't think that this was intentional.
Right.
But nevertheless, let's say 16.3%. So even if Trump cuts that in half, which would be a big deal because you have to assume the first jobs to come back are the low-hanging fruit. Even if Trump cuts that in half, it's still higher than any president, whether that got whether they won or lost their reelection in modern times. And then you have to also factor in. I mean, I forget. There's a day in September when half the country. It's late September. There's a day when half the country can vote early or absentee. So Trump doesn't have till November. And people are going to be voting. A lot of people will be voting in October. So he has maybe 4 months to dramatically cut the unemployment rate. So that would be another sort of data point maybe that we could throw into this.
But I don't think it's just the unemployment numbers. There's also the coronavirus numbers. We're still dying. That's not abating. We're still dying at a fairly steady clip. And there's not a lot of reason to believe that a gradual reopening is going to drive those numbers down. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an epidemiologist. So I can't discount the possibility that, okay, we're going to gradually reopen, but we know more. We're going to socially distance still. We're going to wear our masks. And so and maybe the warmer months won't kill it off, but it might, slow it some. So I'm not saying it can't get better, but I think it's possible that you might have a marginally better employment rate, but still have national anxiety that we're still dying.
Yeah,
and so Trump,
which might disproportionately hit older voters,
right?
Which could be game over. I do want to say, aside from the aforementioned sense that the left is now, I don't want to say overplaying their hand. Because look, I I think that we need major police reform. We've talked about that in past episodes, but aside from the fact that the left is now sort of adopting a more aggressive, almost like authoritarian posture, in my opinion, with the cancel culture and the defund the police and all that stuff, there's also a sense that something about Trump is magical. And that could be that he, some people believe that he's like, this God ordained champion or something. Some people believe that there's that the polls are just underrepresenting his voters, right? Maybe they're afraid.
God doesn't control polling. The devil controls polling, but God controls the ballot boxes.
Well, it's certainly the dark arts, my friend. But I think some people, does polling fully capture? I mean, are Trump voters less likely to admit to it? I think that, Trump does have this 40-some% locked in. These people have tuned out the media, in some cases for good reason. They cannot be persuaded. He is their guy. And so it's sort of like a monster movie. I can just tell you, I will not, the monster movie, you think the monster's dead and then they sort of reanimates at the end and gets you I will not be convinced Trump is done until Joe Biden is being sworn in. As well, that's when I'll be like, okay.
Well, that rock hard base prevents him from truly falling through the floor. I mean, he's not getting into the low 30s, high 20s that certain presidents have popularity-wise in grievous times. And that could be a bulwark against a true blue wave. You're holding on to that base. What's up, lad? Okay, I'm gonna keep doing the show now. Okay? Your microphone. Yeah. Sorry. But so it is possible that polls don't fully capture that. I mean, there's always debates about, are you weighting the polls correctly? I know some folks have said, the NBC Wall Street Journal poll is +7 Democrat. The 26 exit polls weren't like that. Okay, but the Monmouth poll was +4 and the Fox poll was +3, and those were still pretty wide Biden margins. And there's a debate whether you should wait for party ID, because if there is a blue wave, many more people are saying they're Democrats, and you want to be able to test for that and capture that. So the fact that Biden is doing well, regardless of where the Democratic Party affiliation seems to stand, says to me he's in a good spot. And also, it's not just in the national polls or the presidential polls; it's also the Senate polls. It's not, if it was just Trump, and you could say, well, Biden's winning because Trump is bad, or Biden may not be winning because Trump has magical powers. But why is Steve Bullock winning in Montana? Why is Iowa a dead heat? Why is Kansas a possible dead heat? Why is John Ossoff ahead of Purdue in one poll? I mean, these are all just, you don't get as much Senate polling, so I'm not taking any one of these polls to the bank, but they're almost all in the same direction.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's no doubt that, again, I wrote that piece a couple of weeks ago now at the Beast predicting or sort of saying it's looking like a blue wave. It's looking like Biden could win by a landslide. And that matters, by the way. I mean, if Trump is decimated, if Trump is embarrassed, then it's harder for him to claim it's much harder for him to sort of claim it was stolen from him or whatever. And then you could have Trumpism potentially on the ropes, right? There's at least a chance. We talked with David Frum on our Zoom call about this bill. He talks about, his theory is actually if Trump is just destroyed, the left will then overplay their hand. They'll have a supermajority kind of, and then that would potentially allow for sane Republicans and never Trumpers to kind of regain a foothold, at least in the Republican Party. So some people are rooting for this almost like an acceleration strategy. Like if there's an argument that if you really want to restore the Republican Party to like the Ronald Reagan political party, then the best thing to do is to hope for a blowout. That Trumpism is just demoralized and defeated.
Well, but here's the thing. This ties into the defund the police discussion, which I think we should seg into. Look at the slate of the presumptive or likely Democratic Senate nominees. There are no AOCs in there. Mark Kelly, Steve Bullock, Teresa Greenfield, Barbara Boulier in Kansas, John Ossoff. These are all people in the Biden mold. This is the Biden moderate pragmatist wing of the party is in, I wouldn't say total dominance, but they have the whip hand. And that's why. So there'd be a chance that perhaps Republicans can win the Senate races by saying, hey, you want to keep us around to be a check on Biden. And maybe it'll go that way, but it's harder to make that case if the whole team seems like they're in the Biden mold and Biden's not seen as an extreme, off the cliff kind of figure.
But I think I think that's all the more reason why it's crazy that the Democratic Party is allowing the brand to be seen as now, I think, in my opinion, my perspective, but just seen as radical and woke.
But I totally agree with that.
It defies logic because that's not how they won in 2018. It's not the candidate that they nominated for president. And yet, I think that some of this may be the media too, right? But for whatever reason, that's the sense that I'm getting.
Joe Biden came right out and said, I don't support defund the police. Jim Clyburn said that. The head of the Congressional Black Caucus said that. The mayor of Minneapolis, took his lumps in front of a crowd of protesters and said, nope, I'm not going to go there. You're not going to, I'm not quoting him, but he's basically saying, you're not going to pressure me and browbeat me into saying this thing that I don't believe. There's almost no elected Democrat who has grabbed that slogan. In fact, there's been direct pushback to it. I think... By
the way, I have a great idea for a comedy special. It's someone just playing the DMZ and acting out the things that we say.
The fact that Joe Biden won the primary because he pushed back against that faction of the party. He is known for doing that. I think there's an inherent trust that, hey, I know this part of the political spectrum exists, but this guy's not going to be steamrolled by that. And he's building a team that's not being steamrolled by that. And he's backed up with congressional Democrats who are not being steamrolled by that. So I suspect hashtag defund the police is going to go the way of hashtag abolish ICE, which lasted about a month in the summer of 2018 after AOC won her primary. And Republicans thought they had a great way to kill off Democratic momentum. We're going to take a bill written by a Democrat, which is a slapdash bill. It was written by Congressman Mark Pocan. We're going to rush this to the floor. And all the Democrats said, you can do that, but we're not going to vote for it. And Mark Pocan said, I'm not going to vote for it. And Republicans said, okay, this is not going to work. Forget it. And that whole thing died out.
And Laz said you're too loud.
Well, it seems crazy to me. Look, this is the same discussion. You and I had the same discussion at the time. You can do me too if you want. She can't hear me, but she's free to do my hand gestures. Because trust me, if my son was here, he'd be doing the same darn thing. We had the same discussion, back when that happened. But look, it just doesn't make sense to me. If you believe that Donald Trump is this existential threat, we have to do whatever it takes to get rid of him. And then you've nominated Joe Biden. Why are you now attempting to scare a good percentage of Americans they don't like Donald Trump. They don't like Donald Trump's tweets, but they're afraid of the left. And guess what? I think, again, if you're sort of like a suburban white person who, you're college educated, you're maybe like a Rubio Romney kind of voter, but you don't like Trump. This sort of radicalism that we've seen just in the past week, let's say, I think has a potential to push you back into the Trump camp. So I'm just saying, like, if you believe that Trump has to go, why play with fire?
If you thought that Biden was going to be under the thumb of that, he's so scared, he doesn't want to lose the African American vote, he's going to do whatever these radicals say, maybe. But not only does he hold the line there, he retains his African American support by doing that. Because it's hardly the case that the majority of African Americans, who are the folks who are the most reason to push defund the police, the black leadership in the House is not saying that. I
think there is a sense, though, because you've hit on something. I think there's a couple things at play here. Three things at play. One, let's see who he picks as his running mate. That's a big deal. Two, I think there is a sense, and it may not be fair, but one of the things that Trump is going to try to push, and we've seen Don Jr. push this, is that Biden will be asleep at the wheel, and you will have other people pulling the strings. So it's not, you can't count on Biden's being a moderate or an established sort of institutionalist to save you. And then three, there is a sense that the energy in the Democratic Party is with the left. And maybe they're not there yet. They don't have the politicians yet. But eventually they keep coming back. They don't go away. They cannot be pacified. You're never woke enough for them, Bill. They're going to come. You could be at Condé Nast, and they're going to come for you.
Well, this is why Biden doesn't, jump when they say jump, because he knows there's no satisfying it. Look, there are. If you believe, which is increasingly conventional wisdom, that Biden needs an African American running mate, there are four names that are being put out there: Kamala Harris, Val Demings, I should say five: Stacey Abrams, Mayor Bottoms of Atlanta, and Susan Rice. Kamala Harris is the prosecutor. Val Demings is the former Orlando police chief. Mayor Bottoms was the one telling folks not to riot. Stacey Abrams doesn't have that kind of law and order pedigree, which is also not one of the top choices. And Susan Rice was national security advisor.
You forgot someone. You forgot Moshe. He wants to pick Moshe, even though Moshe's a boy. Everybody, look at how beautiful Moshe is.
Mochi, is it Mochi?
Mochi.
Mochi for Veep.
He's not playing with Dad's cord.
What if Biden does go crazy and runs with a cat as his running mate? Biden Mochi.
So, the most likely pick is Kamala. Maybe the second most likely is Val Demings. I think there's a fine line you have to walk with finding someone who has a law and order background. You want someone who you can go to Middle America, who can say, look, we understand this is far more complex than just simply defunding the police. You want to solve this problem. You need police. You need prosecutors. You need to put criminals behind bars. We just need to do it in a fair and compassionate way, not an excessively punitive way, and not in a violent way.
This is boring.
Stat of the year right here.
Do his hand movements with me.
Stat of the year.
Klobuchar had a case where, she directly put someone in prison for life on arguably scanty evidence. That's something that she has to own, very hard to explain. Kamala, to my knowledge, doesn't have a case like that. She has a couple of cases when she was state AG that she refused to intervene at the local level when local prosecutors did something favorable to the police. She said, it's not my place to intervene at the local level.
Make it look like you're inside the library?
And there's one case where an older woman, in her 50s, who had a mental illness, who was Asian American, was brandishing a knife at a nursing home, and the police were called in because they were worried she was violent, and she got shot, and the woman got prosecuted by Kamala, this is when she was DA, for threat and assault, and that case was lost, and the woman successfully sued the police civilly for damages. So I think that's the worst thing on her shoulders as far as an actual case, which I don't think rises to the level of a George Floyd. Now, Demings, was chief of police when there were police brutality cases on her watch that were settled. And I don't think we know all the details of all those cases yet, but there's a lot of vetting that needs to be done there that might be more problematic. So I think as far as who hits the sweet spot for law and order, I think Kamala's probably in a better place than Demings.
Well, look, I think the problem for Biden now is that he kind of painted himself in a corner to a certain degree. I mean, when he said, I'm going to pick a woman, that eliminated, some options.
Narrows
right?
your list.
That narrowed the list. And now there's a sense it has to be an African-American woman.
Which really narrows the list.
This is an identity politics choice at this point, right? And so the last person I remember making an identity politics choice was John McCain. Okay? Now, Kamala Harris, there are known knowns. Like, she comes with some baggage. We know what they are. I feel like she has been vetted by virtue of being in the U.S. Senate and by virtue of going through this presidential campaign. Not a particularly great campaigner, but she's been through the process. We are now talking about people who are like, have not been vetted fully. We think we know Biden is potentially now at this risk of choosing a running mate, the biggest, most important decision he's going to make in his presidential race, based on the political whims of the moment, picking somebody. Now, I will say the media is much less likely to go after Biden's female African-American running mate than when they went after Sarah Palin. They just are. The mainstream media is less likely to do that. I don't think SNL is going to be making fun of Biden's running mate, probably. But having said that, I think that Biden's in a dangerous position now where he may end up picking somebody that he doesn't know. Are they really ready for prime time? And, you can be Sarah Palin had like an 88% approval rating in Alaska. Look at the things she said as governor, Bill. People forget she was not the insane person as governor of Alaska. Sometimes people are just not ready. And I feel like Biden's in this dangerous spot where he may pick someone who isn't quite ready.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Sarah Palin. The other example you can go to is Geraldine Ferraro. And in both those cases, they were seen...
Mondale won one state, Bill.
Right. In both those cases, they were seen as desperation picks, kind of gimmicky, and picking somebody who, at the end of the day, were seen as not especially qualified for the job. And that is a risk when you're doing something essentially explicitly as an identity politics pick. By the way, I think if you run for president, like Pete Buttigieg doesn't have the experience, but I would say by virtue of going through that presidential campaign, he sort of proved himself in a way. Whereas you would have never thought of picking Buttigieg as mayor of, some small town in Indiana if he hadn't gone through that gauntlet. So I do think there's something to be said for that process, but just plucking someone mayor of Atlanta, police chief, let's throw them in the deep end with 2 months or 3 months left. Well, these are great arguments against Demings and Bottoms and Abrams. They're not good arguments against Harris and arguably Rice. Rice doesn't have the elective experience, which I think is not insignificant, but as National Security Advisor, she's not going to see it as
I've arrived. Yeah, I'm at the point now where I feel like Kamala is the safe pick.
Oh, absolutely. I think she was always a safe pick. So I don't think this is new. She was running her Veep Stakes campaign in kind of a low-key fashion earlier on. Stacey Abrams was the one, being brazen. And Kamala wasn't doing, she was doing some media, but it wasn't that, loud. She wasn't saying provocative things along the way. And then when this moment happened, she really dove in. You look at the social media.
Yeah.
Look at between Kamala and Warren and Whitmer, Demings, Abrams, so on and so forth. The Harris feed is much more active. She is, she's not the only person who's been in protest, but she was out there early. She is lacerating Rand Paul on the floor for his opposition to an
Mitt Romney for Veep. How about that?
you can make the case now. She's putting out legislation. She's firing at all cylinders, and I think it's a way for her to communicate. I'm not afraid of these types of moments. I can handle myself in the harshest of spotlights. I can navigate the complexity of racial politics. You don't have to worry that I'm going to have to hide or be hidden because I'm not going to know what to say exactly.
She could be like Biden's Nixon, maybe.
She definitely can lead in harder in certain respects, but she is. This speaks to having gone through the process, having gone through the presidential campaign process. And you can say, "Oh, she ran a bad campaign." If she ran a better campaign, she'd be the nominee. So yeah, obviously it wasn't a perfect campaign, but other candidates have been also rans that have been made nominees too. Biden being one of them, arguably ran a worse campaign than Kamala did in 2008.
I think this moment just destroyed Amy Klobuchar.
Yes.
Larry Sabato put out a top 10 list last week that didn't even have her on the top 10. I think it also maybe there's like an Overton window effect now where Kamala becomes like the moderate safe. As I've said, she now seems to be the safe pick. And so maybe this moment, maybe Kamala is the one. So.
No, I think she's in very good shape, and I think that the people say, "Well, she's a prosecutor." I'm not seeing a lot of stop Kamala, even from the left. Obviously, there's some folks who are never Biden folks who are going to say Kamala's a cop. But there's a piece of
Republicans are going to say, there's going to be Kamala's a cop T-shirts. If there is a convention, wherever that may be, do we know? It's not going to. I assume it's not happening in North Carolina. South Carolina or Charlotte, North Carolina, right?
The convention.
It's not happening there.
Yeah, I think that they're already shopping around. Like Florida and Texas.
Florida, maybe.
Yeah, Florida strikes me.
By the way, West Virginia, Governor Jim Justice would like to have it here in Charleston,
right?
But I don't think that's going to happen.
There's hotel capacity issues, and they'd probably rather have a swing state than a safe state.
And they prefer to have hotels,
right?
So
Jim Justice it owns a hotel, right?
The Greenbrier,
right?
It's a resort, but I don't think that would work either. So it's nice. It's nice. It's very rustic, and rustic's the wrong word. But anyway, the Greenbrier. Yeah, it's actually the Greenbrier, I believe. And then Bill, you may know this as a historian. I believe the Greenbrier there was a plan that if there were like a nuclear attack on DC or something, how there were like plans to escape to like Camp David and stuff like that. But I believe the Greenbrier, I think, maybe I'm wrong, was one of the places sort of designated that could be like a fallback position. Anyway, we'll check that out. We'll vet that. This won't go up without being fully vetted, I'm sure.
I want to say one last thing about defund the police before we shift to one other topic, which I think sort of explain, because you're looking at this as, left gone wild, besmirching the Democrats. Why would they do this? Why would they risk this moment? And I think this is part and parcel of what they've been trying to do since the new activist left resurgence, which is to take issues that have wide consensus among Democrats. All Democrats want to end Trump's anti-immigrant policies, now saying more welcoming and compassionate. All Democrats want to stop climate change. All Democrats want to stop police brutality. They take those sort of consensus positions and inject division. Abolish ICE, Green New Deal, defund the police, as a way to smoke out the insufficiently progressive. We're going to take the mayor of Minneapolis, who's already telling us he is for a long list of police reforms, and humiliate him if they don't want to do this one maximalist thing that we want to do. This has been the game they've played, for a while. It's a game that has not worked. And they don't seem to recognize that it's not working to the point where it's not even successfully causing big division. It's exposing what a weak hand they have to play.
This is why people like me could never take your advice, Bill Scher. I could never be a part of this Democratic Party with this insane base.
But they're not.
Despite the fact
they're not the base. You should not look at. They are too small to be the base.
Well, I tell you what, they're punching above their weight because all they do is drive the national maybe it's the media's. Maybe the media is out to get the left or the Democratic Party because, people are being humiliated. People are being fired. People are having to, It's pathetic and sad what's really happening. And by the way, let's do a little riff here on names. This is in my email newsletter. I have a newsletter, mattklewis.com, and I did a whole riff on this. Think about the names that have been successful, right? Antifa, anti-fascist, who is pro-fascist, right? Antifa works because you can't be against being anti-fascist, right? The Right to Life is a good name. Who's against life? But then again, so is the right to choice. It's hard to be against choice, The National Right to Work Committee, who could be against the right to work? Like, these are good names. Even Planned Parenthood sounds like a hell of a great thing, even if you're pro-life. The name Planned. So in other words, at the very least, these groups are defining themselves in favorable positions that are really hard to argue with, and that would be, the name itself, the slogan would be hard to disagree with. That's not what we're seeing with these other, believe all women or believe women or whatever. They're choosing, and I think this is because I think this has to do with our polarized world, that we are not about persuading anymore. We're about ginning up our people who are like the most hardcore supporters. And I think that that's being reflected, that polarization and that epistemic closure is being reflected in these hashtags and these names and these slogans that are not the kinds of things that are persuasive.
Well, the new activist left is very social media driven, and in a quasi bottom up way, they've learned they can popularize hashtag slogans before they've thought through the details for anything. And
Green New Deal,
and Green New Deal, abolish ICE, and that works to drive conversation.
But at least Green New Deal is at least a good name.
Well, Green New Deal was something that came, Thomas Freeman had Green New Deal before AOC did. And I think there was more substance to Green New Deal than there was to abolish ICE or defund the police. But even then, when they tried to put together an actual bill, they had to cop out and fall back on a non-binding resolution that didn't have a lot of detail to it. And they couldn't even get that, through the Senate with a single Democratic vote. That survives as a hazy slogan that people can still say without getting into what the specifics mean. Yeah. But it still is a general pattern of pushing the slogan without thinking through the policy. And it works to have kind of high-intensity discussion for a short-term period of time. It doesn't sustain as an organizing model or as a way to actually influence policy.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to this larger thing, though. Like, Bill, there is a culture war. And when a progressive dude at the New York Times or at Bon Appetit or wherever is fired, or when the mayor of Minneapolis is humiliated and shamed, like, it doesn't matter to me if that represents a majority of the Democratic Party or not. It shows me how about the radical authoritarian left and how it doesn't matter what percentage they have power. They get people fired from prestigious jobs all the time. At least this cancel culture thing seems to have left college campuses and is now much more pervasive. It's scary stuff. And I think that there are a lot of people such as yours truly who are like, well, should I vote for Trump? I mean, maybe he's our guy. We need a fighter. Like, that's what I think Democrats should be worried about. Look, I'm not going to vote for Trump. We know that. But people like me may ultimately, if you really believe that Trump has to go, this is something that should concern you.
Well, let's talk about the Times for a little bit. I think the Times is an interesting case study. You know, Bon Appetit, the editor there appeared to have a longer list of transgressions.
I don't even know the guy. I'm just, you know.
I mean, there was, I think, a deeper issue in just how he was, you know, treating employees and directing coverage.
I mean, we got another thing with Andrew Sullivan. Apparently, Andrew Sullivan having to get ideas like run through the gauntlet to write something. Is it at the New Yorker or wherever? New York.
If there's anyone I have completely barren tear ducts for, it is Andrew Sullivan. This guy had his own media empire, his own blog where he could write whatever he wanted, to say whatever he felt like, and he chose to shut it down and get hired by a magazine that has editors. If you don't want to be edited, don't work for editors. If anyone has the capacity and the resources to not be edited, it is Andrew Sullivan. He chose to put himself in the position that he's in. If he doesn't like it, he can leave.
No, that's a fair point. Most people don't have the ability, like even if they wanted to build their own pirate ship and be Joe Rogan or whatever, most people couldn't financially survive. But Andrew Sullivan could. He's the one guy we know who cannot be censored, at least not easily. He could. That's a fair point. But nevertheless,
even for lesser names, people have made names for themselves on podcast, on social media. Saying provocative things that wouldn't be accepted, you know, in mainstream publications.
But these aren't provocative things.
For better or for worse. Andrew
Sullivan, here's the deal with all these people. They're all liberals. These people being canceled and shut down and humiliated, they're all liberals. None of them are conservative.
Well,
Andrew
Sullivan's a more that's not so easily
arguably
defined.
did more. Andrew Sullivan arguably did more to get gay marriage accepted and mainstream than anybody. More than Obama, certainly. More than Biden. I mean, Andrew Sullivan is...
Let me give him a little too much credit. I'm sure there's a lot of gay rights activists that wouldn't say that. But he was a figure. I mean, he's...
I'm talking about mainstreaming it. You know, there are activists out there, but Andrew Sullivan was someone who was able to translate it, I think, to get it in front of people who might not have otherwise sort of seen that person. He argued that this is an institution that it's like a bourgeois institution we should be inviting everybody into.
But he has a lot of
That's a persuasive argument.
But he has lots of conservative elements to his politics as well. He's not a straight liberal. Anyway, New York Times. New York Times is sort of an interesting situation.
It's like the old days. This is like the old DMZ. This is like the blogging heads or what would be the weekend blog? Yeah.
So James Bennett resigns after running Tom Cotton's op-ed, which called for military force to crack down on protests, although Cotton would say it was to crack down on looting and rioting, not peaceful protests. And it sparked a wave of internal protest in the newsroom, because the editorial department is separate from the newsroom. But the newsroom was up in arms, argued that it didn't adhere to New York Times standards, wasn't properly fact-checked, wasn't a good faith exploration of issues, and Bennett steps down. And now Bennett's a guy who some folks remember from The Atlantic. This is a guy who gave Coates the space to write his famous piece on reparations.
Jamel Bowie.
So it's he hired a lot of very liberal folks for the Times editorial staff. So it's not like he had one gear, but he definitely was of the tradition. I think it's the long tradition of the New York Times to have conservative voices in the stable, have a wide range of opinion, not be, even though it's a liberal editorial board, make sure that the page had a wide range. And there's always was a William Safire. There's long been a David Brooks. They had Bill Crystal before, but the page is bigger. There are literally just really more individual. There's more ink in the page. There's more op-eds on the page, and so you have Brooks and you have Stevens and you have Ross Douthat, and you have other ad hoc things like a Tom Cotton piece. The piece appeared to be solicited. The Times, according to Cotton, the Times sort of steered him to that piece that further exacerbated the situation. But editorial boards, editorial staffs do that sort of thing. They're looking for things to mix it up and instigate conversation. So, should Bennett be penalized? If you take at face value, and I do, that this wasn't the greatest op-ed. This was not well fact-checked. This was not the most important argument to put into the conversation. Sure, you can have conservative voice, and this was sort of a pretty cut-rate piece that really wasn't up to time standards. I can accept that argument. Should it have meant his job? That's another level of question. And I think there's a lot of pressure on media institutions to both be provocative and mix it up while adhering to, for lack of a better word, politically correct standards, which puts a lot of folks in a very tense and complicated situation where it's easy to fall off the tightrope. I don't think that means where you sign on that should affect your vote between Biden and Trump. Joe Biden is not the editorial board editor of the New York Times. But the thing that sort of, tips me in this discussion is the average New York Times reader is very liberal, but probably likes being nominally challenged on the editorial page, wants the exposure to the conservative voice, wants to feel like I know what's going on in the world. I've learned something about middle America today. I've done my good deed for free speech. I don't think the readership is in the same place as the newsroom is. That's my guess. I mean, I don't have a survey data on it. That's just my guess. And I certainly don't think the average New York Times reader is going, "Oh, I'm for the tanks now. Thank you, Tom Cotton." Oh, this headline said Trump said politically neutral thing. I guess Trump's okay. I don't think the New York Times readership feels that way. So the risk here, to me, is not as pronounced as I think others seem to think it is.
Bill, I just got a text. I'm going to have to jump in like 5 minutes. So I would just respond by saying, look, so I don't agree with Cotton's position, but he's a U.S. senator. I think he represents a viewpoint that is not obscure. It's not a fringe viewpoint. I think we should be in the business of encouraging, fostering dissenting viewpoints and even the right to be wrong and engaging in ideas, even bad ideas. And I think that what is happening is that we are expediting this epistemic closure. I think basically what's happened is that if you're a conservative outlet, you have a line that you have to follow. And if you're a liberal or mainstream outlet, and I repeat myself, you have a line that you are supposed to follow. And anybody who deviates from that is actually being off message or off brand, which could offend the readers and or the employees that for some reason they're I think this is like a Maoist sort of tendency to want to stifle speech that we disagree with. And so this greatly concerns me. I have to be honest. And again, I'm no fan of Tom Cotton, and I don't agree with what he wants to do. But this was a prominent, serious person making an argument that is certainly not a fringe argument. It was a timely argument. And guess what? It got a lot of people talking. Like, isn't that part of what opinion journalism, one of the byproducts is getting debate going and getting people talking? Well, guess what? When they got that, they achieved that. They got next to, as David Frum told us, next to the Jim Mattis piece in the Atlantic, the Tom Cotton piece probably got the most attention and the most people talking. And so that's a win. Unless you're an activist. If you're an activist, then you have an agenda. And I don't think even opinion journalists are supposed to be activists, but I guess the world has changed.
Well, the thing that's tough for the Times is, like, they should be better than being a clickbait farm. Like, just stirring up conversation should not be enough for a New York Times op-ed. They should have a higher standard. Now, I do think that the Times, like almost every other publication, goes a little softer if it's a big name. They like having pieces by senators and other prominent figures. So, like, I had one New York Times op-ed in my life. It got fact-checked. They probably went a little lighter on Tom Cotton because he's a senator.
But I believe, and I could be wrong, but I think I read that he wanted to write something else, and they suggested. Right. And maybe that's the argument for firing the guy, which I still think is wrong, but anyway.
Right. I mean, I think they wanted to stir up conversation on this topic, which I think they have. I think that's legitimate to do. To say, you know what, I have a vision for what I want our page to be today. I want to get. We've given our editorial voice over here. We want to get another voice over there. Yeah. Let's reach out to a person who can do that for us. It's not
like this came out of thin air. I mean, it's not like Tom Cotton was the only person advocating using military force against civilians. Donald Trump suggested that, right? James Mattis comes out and criticizes. This was a legitimate topic, and to have somebody espousing this viewpoint, even though I don't agree with it, that's perfect. If the New York Times can't do that, I just think, you just quit. Why read the New York Times if it's going to be, this is what the left wants you to think, and and then we'll read the Daily Caller for what the other side wants.
What's hard is that what does a media operation of high stature do to properly report on and reflect what's going on in the country if you have a significant segment of the country espousing things which, by a certain standard, are illegitimate? It should be illegitimate to argue for using military force on civilians. But probably a good number of people actually support it. Maybe not a majority, but clearly people in high office do think that. So what does the New York Times do?
I got to bounce anyway, man. I apologize.
That's right. But I think the concern in the newsroom is you're legitimizing this thing by putting the New York Times imprimatur on it. And I would argue, don't give the New York Times that much credit. Have some faith in your readership. Have some faith in the broader conversation that it's not going to elevate and further the opinions because it's in the New York Times.
All right. Check us out. You can support our Patreons, either of ours, and be part of. We're going to do just you and me. We call it the DM Zoom Friday afternoon. Check that out. Bill Scher, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. So I'll see you on Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern. Right. If you haven't become a Patreon supporter yet, do it before Friday at 4. You can get on that. And
on the call.
Otherwise, we'll see you here next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.